Altered Moments is live. Welcome to everyone who is joining us today. I'm Kimberly Stevens, your host, and welcome to Altered Moments on this Tuesday afternoon. What is an altered moment? An altered moment is simply a moment in time where God shows up and changes our lives, and we're never the same. I've written a book called Altered, Finding Hope Through Grit and Gratitude to Never Give Up. And it's a story of many altered moments. It's a story about how I got through the death of my son, 4 years in the hospital with my daughter, her eventual life-saving liver transplant, a brutal divorce and custody battle. I then survived breast cancer, and then I survived the foreclosure of my home. And I say all these things not to say, look how great I am. I say them to say, look how great God is. Because with God, all things are possible. And if we can find enough grit and gratitude to get our stuff to the altar, God promises that he will change us as we, and he walks with us through our pain. Well, I'm excited that you're here. We have an amazing guest, Brock Zevan. He's joining us from North Carolina. And a couple words that describe Brock: he is a disciplined and consistent entrepreneur. We need to ask him about that. He's also a Christ follower, and he is right here backstage. Brock.
How are you?
Good.
I like the backstage. It was nice back there. Very cozy in the backstage.
Beautiful. I tried to, have all the perks for you.
I love the green room. It's beautiful.
Welcome to Altered Moments. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. This is great. I really appreciate this opportunity to be here and to share and to help other people in their journey, in their path of maybe something that they're missing or something that they have that they're trying to figure out what to do with it. So I appreciate you having me here, Kimberly.
Definitely. Thanks for taking the time. So you're joining us from North Carolina, right?
Good old Charlotte, North Carolina. I was just in Myrtle Beach this past weekend. So I was down in South Carolina, but I reside right here in Charlotte, Lake Norman area of North Carolina.
Beautiful. You have 2 kids and a fur baby.
I do. My fur baby, a new fur baby. So I have my son Bryce, who's 5, and then my daughter Brielle, who's 11. And since Santa gave the letter for our latest fur baby, I asked Brielle, I said, what do you want to name this dog? And she says, Dad, since Santa gave the letter to Bryce and I, and both our birthdays in August, I looked up our zodiac sign and I came up with the name Leo. I was like, wow, okay, that was pretty good, Brielle. So we have Leo in our family.
Nice. Welcome, Leo.
Yes. So he's our little cavapoo.
Aw. And how old is he?
Gosh, 13 weeks, 14 weeks.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
He is as puppy as puppy could be.
Yep, absolutely. You're a little busy.
Yes. Never a dull moment.
Wow. Well, I know you've got some exciting things on the horizon right now. You have a book coming out. You're doing some coaching. You have a morning motivational podcast. Tell us some things about those and some things about you.
So it's never a dull moment. I typically we were kind of calculating it out over the last month. I do about 38 between podcast shows each month. So I do a mindset motivation coaching program every Monday through Friday, different leaders that are on our show at 8:15 Eastern time. And I have different amazing people who lead every different day. I'm the host on Mondays and Fridays, and one of our popular podcasts is called Figure It Out Fridays, where we bring on people who had to figure it out in life and what they did to figure it out. And I mean, so many amazing, your story. I mean, it just amazes me what people have grown through and gone through in this. And, one of the messages I was listening to somebody, they say, you know, before God brings you the promise, he's got to bring you some problems. And I have no shortcoming of that, but it's made me who I am today. And so I do a lot of podcasts and programs. My new book, Turning Scripts into Conversation, just came out. Somebody that we know, Rebecca Black, was my publisher.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so she helped me publish my book. And so I'm like really, really excited about having that. Talk about really the personalities that we all have. And, I say many times that, we're just not asking the right questions, or we are not listening to understand. We just want to respond. I say that God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Instead, we like to use just our entire mouth and pretend we weren't even listening. And so I break that down in the book and help entrepreneurs and help people in their relationships, being divorced and going through a lot of challenges in my life. I stopped pretending I knew everything. Talk a little bit about that later. But I started to listen more, listen with intentionality and really validate what they're saying to me instead of thinking about what I want to say about me or about, to them. And so, so I do that. And then I started getting involved in coaching. So now I'm a life coach and a business coach, both in the entrepreneurship world, either in real estate specifically, but I help a lot of CEOs, business owners, either run a team or people who are trying to grow their business to figure out, where they should be going, the visionary aspect of things. And I do real estate. So it is never a dull moment.
And you have 2 kids and a fur baby on top of all that.
Yeah, I had 2 kids and Brielle's in soccer, Bryce is in soccer. And because we're in the beginning stage of the puppy, it seems like I'm at the vet like every week for their shots and getting them taken care of and figuring out who's going to watch him because he's not old enough to go to a place yet. So I have to find other families who could take care of dogs. And so, yeah, and I just got involved with investing. So now I do investing all across the country. We started a team. So now we're it's never a dull moment.
Wow. So for those of us who are listening and on the podcast and not able to see the banner, you can reach out to Brock at brockzevan.com, and that's brockzevan.com. And you have your book up there and your podcast, and I saw there were a bunch of different banners people could click on if they're interested in any of the things you're talking about.
Yep, absolutely. Everything is in there. We actually did a little blurb about my life, broke it down in a story and a video. So we did a short 8-minute video about really from me being the oldest of 5, growing through some challenges, my addiction, my financial problems, to my parents. Actually, my parents are celebrating their 47th wedding anniversary. So happy anniversary, Mom and Dad.
Happy anniversary to them.
Yeah. So it's just amazing. I have amazing people in my life that lead by example. And that's all I can, that's what I ask of myself, is just to show up and lead by example. You and I were talking about it on the show earlier, backstage, of just showing up. Literally, that is the biggest thing that a lot of people, there's many times I didn't want to show up. I don't know what people are going to say to me. I don't know what it's going to be like, but you just show up, and God has a way of working it out. And it always happens in a way like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. I didn't see that coming my way. And that's God's way of saying, just stick with me, bud. Just have the faith and you're going to be fine.
Absolutely. And many times it leads to an altered moment that changes us, and we're never the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And with that, I know that you have an altered moment or two to share with us today. Give us a little context about what was going on in your life, where you were, and tell us more about your altered moment.
Sure. Yeah. It's when you brought this to my attention, I was like, wow, what a great concept. What a great topic, because it is, you do have that altered pivoting moment that just changes your life. And, many times if I say, what were you doing last year at this time? Most of the time people don't really remember. Okay, they only remember
So
altering
true.
moments. Like so many, like I tell people who are like bent out of shape or upset when I'm coaching them, I'm like, all right, well, okay, if this is such a huge thing, such a huge moment, what were you doing last year at this time? You have no idea. What were you doing last month at this time? You have no idea. So this emotion will eventually pass. But there are some altered moments that I remember very, very vividly where I think it's God's slideshow of me like, hey, let me make sure you remember this so I can help you and alter your thought process and your thinking for what you got going on. And so um one of my altering moments, I'm an addict of drinking. And
Wow.
I was I learned I learned this is such a great learning tip. I learned how to be a functioning alcoholic. And I learned how to do it at a very high level because I was making a lot of money. And at the same token, I was able to absorb so many different things and do different things because as a visionary and as somebody that I am today, I still have these choices. I just make them differently now. I think with a different head. I think clarity wise. I think with a different way of inside my head where it's like I have to be the person that God wants me to be, but I had no idea because God wasn't in my life. And so I was in Virginia driving because the places that I could drink were in my car. I know that doesn't sound very exciting or safe by any means, but I'm just being honest and real. So I was driving in Charlotte, 77 North, and I just needed to get away. And the only spot I felt that I can get away with without getting in trouble, you know, without somebody else seeing me was in my car. So I drove to Virginia and I was pretty much hammered to the point like I couldn't drive anymore.
Wow.
And I pulled over in one of those hotels that you see that are like, the 29.95, like stay here one night. And yeah, I was in one of those and it was cold. It was like in January, and I just passed out. I remember I had a bottle of vodka in my hand, and I was laying over, and I was just like, "What am I doing? Like, what is going on in my life?" This was a month after I drove from New York, and I don't know if you can see it here, but I tore my bicep muscle playing football because I wanted to be, and this was like 8 years ago. All this was not like 20 years ago. This was like 8 years ago in my life. And I drove all the way to New York, and the only way I can handle the bicep pain was I drank vodka the whole way down. And it was a 10-hour trip. And that's
Wow.
what I did. And so when I was in Virginia, I was like, what am I doing? Like I cannot keep doing this. And I remember I got back in my car that morning, like hungover, just miserable. And I was like, something needs to change. And I said to myself, you'll see a lot of my posts now. I say nothing changes if nothing changes. And it sounds very simple, but literally I kept doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, praying, going to church, doing everything under the sun, but nothing was changing because Brock didn't want to change.
Mm.
And I didn't even have that moment in my life with I was doing it all on my own. I didn't know what it was like to pray, have God in my life. I was Catholic, but I didn't understand having conversations. I didn't understand asking God because Brock's ego was still like, "You got this, Brock. You can do it." And so in September of 2016, I got to a point where I had to stop drinking. It was just my life was just crumbling, and I made it to October because I drank again on October 30 on Halloween. And I finally decided, like, you get to a point in your life where you're like, enough is enough. Well, little did I know that that altered moment was actually going to sabotage my next 2 years of my life.
Wow.
And I thought I made it because you're like, I stopped drinking. All right, everything should be good now. No, that's when really everything fell apart. Um, that October, during that following that next year, I lost my real estate license due to a property management lawsuit. So I lost my job. My marriage, we got divorced. I had a newborn son, Bryce, was 3 months old, and we got divorced that year. My house was repossessed. We were living in a $500,000 house. Thought everything was going really well. Both my cars are repossessed.
Wow.
I had somebody so mad at me they called DSS against me with my children. I had a sheriff show up at my door. I had 156,000 in IRS debt that I was about to go to jail for. I mean, it was one attorney, one sheriff coming to my house, and the hardest part was my daughter at the time period. It's like, Dad, why do police officers come here? And now I got to lie to my daughter because I can't tell her the truth. And I was just a mess. And no job. I didn't know how I was going to pay for things. I was running a real estate team. I had $27,000 in overhead per month that I was trying to still pay for. I didn't have, as my dad would say, a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out, and excuse my language, but I didn't have nothing. Nothing. Credit cards were maxed out. And so when I was hearing your story, it just like is so true. God does, like, I feel like people like you and I, like, we really make, without him, to make impossible possible. But I struggled for 2 years because I still didn't have God in my life because I was doing it all on my own. I was just like, if I was just going to work a little bit harder, do this a little bit more, fight a little bit longer, stay up a little bit later, and that's what got me to it. But man, I was struggling mentally. I still wasn't there. I got to a point that I wanted to end my life. I had it all mapped out, which tree I was going to run into, how it was going to look. And then it was like one of those alternate moments again, like, yeah, but
Wow.
that seems too easy to do it that way. And so I gradually got my life back together. I was able to, come up with the part of the things I love to do now is like solve problems, because that's what I kept doing every single day. Is like, all right, how can I make money? How can I do this? And so I hung my license in South Carolina, and I started getting referrals. I went from a 4-person team to an 18-person team. I started just really working, and then I had another altar moment. It seems to be in the winter months, in the cold time, where it seems these altar moments happen for me. And gosh, now I would say it's about 3.5 years ago. We were coming down off the mountain. We went with the cabin with my girlfriend, her family, and I was going to go to New York for an event that I was getting ready to coach and speak at. And for whatever rhyme or reason, I put on my phone, I was driving, and this podcast came up. And I see this guy, his name's Justin Ford, and he's actually one of my spiritual mentors today.
Wow.
I was listening to his story, and his story was just like probably your story, my story. Like sometimes it's just all kind of surrounding the same thing, like distress, problems, challenges, just different names, different states with different amounts and different things. And he was in jail, like he was only a young kid. He was in his teenage years, upper teenagers, like 20 some years old when he was telling his story, or at the time period, but he was in and out of jail like 20 sometimes. And the last time he was in jail, he remembers he was saying, I was drinking water out of the toilet because I was so dehydrated from the drugs he was on. And I'm like driving the car, and I'm like, wait a minute. Who is this guy? And then he started telling about his life and where he is today and how he started to become spiritual. And I guess I've always been spiritual, but I just never used the tools that God gave me, the gifts that God gave me. I never used them. They were there. It's kind of like on the shelf. You saw them, you looked at them, but you really didn't even know what to do with them. It's kind of like when you go to the dentist and you see all those tools and you're like, why do you have so many tools? I have no idea, but they do. They have a name for a tool. They have a special apparatus with the number of teeth that you got, and every tool does something different. And I feel that we all have the same blessing that God gives us. We just don't know what to do with the tool until we start asking God these questions. And so I said to myself, I got to go down to Florida and meet this guy. And he said what event he was doing. So I was in New York, and I told my girlfriend, I was like, Wendy, I'm going to go to Florida and meet this guy. She's like, what? I said, yeah, I'm going to go down to Florida. I'm like, do you know him? I didn't know anything about the guy. Didn't know his phone number, didn't know his email address, didn't know nothing. I said, I'm just going to go down there and meet him. I knew what conference he was at because I was affiliated to part of the program. But other than that, I had no clue who he was. In the alternate moment, I remember sometimes I get emotional just thinking about it because it was kind of the COVID season was starting to, like, Florida was a little bit different down there, and what you could do, what you couldn't do. And you were allowed to do certain things, but you had a certain areas, and it was kind of crazy if you look back at it. But I remember walking into the courtyard, and it was outside because we were in Florida, and I literally have never seen the guy besides on pictures, and I remember standing out there, and I was just like, "Where is he? Where is he?" And I found him. I was like,
Awesome.
"There he is." And I walked up to him, and I'm not going to get emotional, but I shook his hand. I said, "You have no idea who I am, but you have altered and changed my life. I never was I never had any spiritualness inside of me, and God aligned me, and I just want to introduce myself." And since that day, him and I probably we definitely engage several times a month. But not only did he do that, he led me into, he's like, "I think you need to be on one of my prayer calls." And so I started listening. And then a couple weeks in, he's like, "I need you to lead it."
Wow.
And so now I lead a prayer call, a national prayer call, and it's on Clubhouse. And it just, like, I'm leading a prayer call, for crying out loud. Like, I had no, like, there was nothing. If you really understood that I had no direction, no guidance, nothing whatsoever. I went to church barely just because of my mom, and it was like a check off the box, to now leading a prayer call, helping people. I'm now part of Catholic Young Professionals group here in Charlotte, working with different priests, working in different organizations, trying to go into different private colleges to teach young entrepreneurs, because they're so thirsty for this knowledge that they just don't know, because society masks it with so many different things. To be able to help somebody, God's given me a second chance because I wanted to end my first chance. And so he really has worked through me and altered me in these two magical ways, where he's like, "You're one of my slow bloomers, but here you go. I'm gonna give you all the tools. It's your turn now." And so those would be my two most impactful altering moments that I've had in my life.
I too am a slow learner. And it does feel pretty amazing. I also am somebody who wanted to end my first chance.
Mm,
And now to take the story and turn it around and share hope through things that really were hopeless at the time is amazing. And it's inspiring to hear how your life changed on a dime, because you took a drive from New York to Florida and showed up and took a chance to meet somebody whose words had already changed your life.
mm-hmm.
You mentioned a prayer call that you lead. Where is that? How can people join if they're looking for something like that?
Yeah, I will. Good question here. Let me just pull it up on my Facebook page so I can get you the exact name of the group. Um, it is now it has the real estate prayer call, but it's for all entrepreneurs. But it's the real estate prayer call, and we have a private Facebook page. And what I'll do is I will text it to you or put it in the chat. I don't know how
Perfect.
to. Oh wait, I can do it in the chat here. I will put it in there so that way you can see it, and put it in the comments. So that way you can have it. But yeah, it is the prayer group that we do, and we do it Monday through Friday, 7:30 Eastern time. It's about 30 minutes. It's also in Clubhouse. All that information is in the private group. And I just also put it in the YouTube comments that you got there, as well as
Perfect.
in chats. So that way people can go to it in different leaders all across the country. And some of them become my coaching partners. I now coach with them. Some of them I help them with virtual. I run a virtual agency as well. So it's just amazing. It really is amazing. I tell you, it's as you know, it's just how many doors God opens up for us.
Absolutely. And thinking about those circumstances that you've come through, and I'm the same. When I think about the circumstances that I came through, at the time, I had no idea, one, that I would even survive it, and two, that sharing that story would inspire somebody else to never give up.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, because giving up is just easy. It's too easy to let that go, and many of us tend to do that for whatever rhyme or reason. Maybe it's our why isn't big enough, or our purpose. But my kids have helped me tremendously, more than they will ever even imagine, because I mean, I remember Brielle, because when my whole drinking was started, Brielle was like, I would think of moments when I wanted to make bad decisions, that I was one decision away from just could go down a completely different,
Wow.
an altering of something totally different. I used to think this. So I would think this about my daughter, that if I make this decision, Brock, there's going to be another father walking your daughter down the aisle because you made a poor decision. And then I would think about my son Bryce, and I'd be like, Brock, if you make this decision, there's going to be another father giving your son a high five at his graduation. And I was like, not over my dead body. And I would just make
Wow.
the right decision to do it, because I just, and we make so many choices throughout our day. Um, and sometimes there's several an hour, and you build that habit, and you build that resistance, and it's a behavior, and then you have to work through it. Because I do my podcast show Monday through Friday. I do it 51 out of 52 weeks a year, and people say like, wow, you do it that many times? I said, I drank that many times, so why can't I make a good decision that many times?
Amazing.
So yeah, thank
Amazing.
you. Yeah, it's crazy.
So I'm hearing you say that first, in order to really allow God to change you, you had to decide why. And your why was your children.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had to make a commitment to show up, to be the person that you wanted to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And and to this day, with my new spiritual life, I don't I don't push it. I don't try to force things like I used to and try to fix things. It's more along the time, I was sharing it on another show, if I give my best, then it's okay to rest. And when
Mm.
you rest, that's God's way of working. Because I don't have to work every single time 24/7. God's with me to help me work during that time period. And He wants me to rest. He's like, you need to rejuvenate. I got you. I got you covered. Let me handle this from here. Stop trying to force things, because this is not a forcing issue right here. Just let things ease in. Have the patience that you need. And it's like, all right. So I have to work on my patience. I got to work on that and have conversations around that. So that's what's helped me today to be and become the person I have been, and work on daily.
You mentioned your prayer group, and talk a little bit about how being part of a prayer group has helped you keep your why front and center and to show up consistently.
Yeah. So when I to answer that question, when you feel alone in life and you feel like you're the only person going through things,
Mm.
you're kind of like, nobody's going to understand me. Nobody's going to get it. And so I felt like that for a very long period of time. And then I went into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I went into AA. And little did I know that God was preparing me and setting me up for another meeting or for another group later down my road, which was this prayer group. Because in the AA, when I felt so alone, I went in there and started talking a little bit of my story, and people were like laughing at me, like, oh man, that's nothing. You should have saw what I was doing. You should have saw this. And I'm like, wow, you were doing it too. You had this going on, and this was going on, and this was going on. And it was like, you didn't feel alone anymore. And you felt like you were a part of something, and other people were going through the same situation. So fast forward that 7 years, in a prayer call, in a prayer service, and people that I had met, because I didn't know, it's like, it's not good to go around, well, I don't really know about God and he hasn't really helped me. And like, you sound like, what's wrong with you? But I
Right.
didn't know how to think. I didn't know what it was because I didn't understand the process of what it was, the conversations. I knew to say the Our Father, the Hail Mary, but I just didn't know how to have conversations. And so when I got into a room, just like it in AA, but now I was with other spiritual minded people, prayerful people, I was like, wow, I'm not alone. I understand that people are struggling just as much as I'm struggling, but what do? They ask God for help.
Yeah.
And that what's made a huge difference in my life in these groups with these people is because I now understand. And somebody will say, well, I just asked God for this. I was like, wow, that's a really good idea. I'm going to add that to my prayer list. I'm going to add that to my morning routine. I'm going to share that in my journal. I'm going to write that down. And so now I do all these different habits, these different behaviors, just like it was when I went into a bar. I'd be like, wow, I didn't think about that drink. Wow, that seems pretty crazy. Holy smokes, look at that. But now you get in the right rooms with the right people,
Yeah.
and God does the right things.
Yeah.
And now those are blessings that bestow upon us. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what kind of how it came into my head.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And we're just about at the end of our time. So I know we're going to have you back on. But one final question. What would you say to somebody who wants to take the steps and to bring a conversation with God into their life, but they don't know where to start? What would be your one piece of advice for that?
It's funny, on my podcast I asked the same question, and now presented to me, it's just like, what is that one thing? And I would say this. One of my favorite lines was, my ego was loyal to my mistakes.
Oh,
And ego is just easing God out. And when you actually take your ego and you put it on the shelf and you take ownership of your life and bring God back in, the ego slowly eases out. But to this day, I still don't want to let go of some of my problems and some of my mistakes because I want to prove I was right. No, she did me wrong. No, they just don't understand me. I know I'm right. And instead of doing that anymore, I really have to focus on it, pray about it every day to ease my ego out and to let God in. Because if your ego is so big, there's no room for God to come in.
so true.
And so you have to be able to make room for him. And you can't be loyal to your mistakes. Just take ownership. The faster you can take ownership, the faster you can move on, and then leaves room for God to come in. So that would be my final thought of what's helped me to hopefully help somebody else out who might be having an ego challenge.
Absolutely. I think we all have ego challenges.
Mm-hmm.
We're all the most important people we know.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yes. And especially, I think when things are hard, we can magnify that hard thing. And
Mm-hmm.
because we're going through that hard thing, it makes us feel like we're more important. And it's harder to let our ego down and let God in.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Amen. Yep.
Yeah. Well, this has been an incredible half an hour. And I thank you for being here. And thank you to all of our listeners. If you want to know more about Brock, it's Brock, BROCKZEVAN.com. All of the things he's been talking about today are on his website. And if you want to know more about my story, or you're not a reader, but you want to know more about bringing hope into your life, go to my website at KimberlyJStevens.com. You'll find on there the Altered playlist, which is 4.5 hours of music, of songs that inspire us to live more hopefully. And you'll also find a link where you can order my book if you are curious to hear more about my story. We will be back with an altered moment very soon. You can listen to us on podcasts wherever podcasts are played. You can also see the replays on YouTube and Facebook. I would encourage you that if something touched you today, to please share this out to your friends and family. And until next time, have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will be back soon. Thank you again, Brock.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.